And I'll call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee of the Metropolitan Council for December 1st, 2025, joined by a healthy quorum of the committee. Excuse me. Just quickly, we'll start with the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county region, is the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Oyate, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Oyate, the Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Oyate, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities, representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home. Committee members, we have an agenda in front of us. If there's no recommended changes or discussion, we'll consider that approved. We have an agenda. Next on the agenda is approval of the November 17th, 2025 Community Development Committee minutes. Is there a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Members Morales and Carter.
Campbell's.
Oh, it was handless. I swear. Councilmember Carter's lips move and everything. It's good. Okay. Any discussions, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Committee members, we move into our public hearing. It's item 2025-314. It's the public hearing on the adoption of the Livable Communities, Affordable, and Life Cycle Housing Goals for 2021 to 2030 for the cities of Anoka, Champlin, Norwood Young America, and Norwood Young America. And I'll just go ahead and open the hearing, correct? We don't have a staff, but thank you. So the first item on our agenda is, let's see, well, we have quite a detailed script here. All right, I'll start down here. All right, thank you. So item 2025-314, it's the public hearing for the Livable Communities Act Affordable and Life Cycle Housing Goals. Thank you everyone for being here today to consider the comments related to the 2021 to 2030 affordable and life cycle housing goals for the cities of Anoka, Champlin, Norwood Young America, which are choosing to enroll in the Livable Communities Act local housing incentives account. The Livable Communities Act requires that the Met Council negotiate affordable and life cycle housing goals with each municipality that elects to participate in the Livable Communities Grant Program, and the Met Council must adopt by resolution after a public hearing the negotiated goals. The Met Council is using the same goal-setting methodology for newly enrolling communities as was used at the beginning of the planning decade. Using this methodology between 2020 and 2024, a total of 78 cities adopted their affordable and life cycle housing goals, which were then adopted by the council to complete the Livable Communities enrollment process for 2021 to 2030. I will now open this hearing and we welcome public comment. As I understand, Michelle, we have no one pre-registered. Great. Is anyone present to address the council as this public hearing? Hearing none, I will now close the public hearing. Public comments must be received by 5 p.m. Thursday, December 11th, 2025. As a reminder, to comment on the affordable and life cycle housing goals, members of the public who are listening may still provide public comment in the following ways. You can write to us here at the council at 390 Robert Street North, St. Paul, Minnesota, 55101. You can fax us at 651-602-1313. You can email the council at public.info@metc.state.mn.us. And finally, you can record a comment on the public comment line at 651-602-1500 or the TTY at 651-291-0904. At the close of the public comment process, staff will prepare a summary of public comments. The Met Council will have the opportunity to review those comments prior to taking action on re-enrollment. We'll now resume the remainder of our agenda. We have 3 non-consent business items before us today, committee members. The first is item 2025-310. It's accepting the public comment report and adopt the Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan Modernizing Mapping Project. And we have Tracy Kinney here today. And are you solo today, Ms. Kinney?
Sure.
Okay, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. Hi, my name is Tracy Kinney. I'm a planning analyst in Regional Parks and Trails of Community Development. Today before you is a business item to accept the public comment report and adopt the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan Amendment Modernizing Mapping Project. A little context to start. The Regional Parks and Trails system has grown significantly since 1974, creating the need for updated tools like modern geographical information systems or GIS technology to provide more accurate and reliable mapping. The Regional Parks and Trails GIS dataset that is developed and updated annually through the Modernizing Mapping Project now provides far greater accuracy than high-level long-range plans. Given this precision and maturity, the Regional Parks and Trails GIS dataset is proposed to take on a larger role with tracking regional park and trail boundaries. The Modernizing Mapping Project proposes to build on the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan and Imagine 2050 adopted in February 2025 by amending Section 2 System Plan Action 1 to establish the Regional Parks and Trails GIS dataset as the Met Council's primary reference for park and trail boundaries. In doing so, this will align the system plan maps with this dataset. This change formalizes a consistent, reliable mapping approach for planning and funding, while the Regional Park and Trail long-range plans will continue to serve as the vehicle for Met Council approvals. The policy plan change is located in attachments 1 and 2 of your business item. The GIS is a needed component of the system plan mapping tools. The policy plan's system plan provides a regional, regularly updated overview of recognized regional park and trails. Long-range plans define unit-level boundaries and facilities on a 10-year life cycle. The GIS offers parcel-level interactive data used for planning, acreage, funding, and maps that is updated annually. And land records remain the legal authority for ownership, acquisitions, and boundary changes. To align the system plan with actual on-the-ground boundaries, agencies must correct discrepancies in their GIS data. Major longstanding inconsistencies require a GIS correction long-range plan amendment by December 31st, 2026, which are eligible for administrative review. Minor errors should be fixed during the next Regional Park or Trail long-range plan update and in the 2026 data submittal. Together, these updates will ensure the system plan accurately reflects real park and trail boundaries. The Council has consulted with the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission, you, the Community Development Committee, and has partnered with the Regional Parks implementing agencies as part of the Modernizing Mapping Project. Early presentations to MPOSC and CDC showed strong support for using GIS as a primary reference tool, while clearly distinguishing it from official legal land records, and highlighted the need to communicate how the dataset will be used for funding, acreage, planning, and documentation. By September, both MPOSC and CDC refined the Council actions to align with the public comment period and upcoming public hearing, as well as added the policy plan text change included in attachments 1 and 2. The public comment period ran from September 24th to November 17th, 2025, and resulted in only 2 comments, one supportive of the GIS modernization effort, and one seeking clarification about whether the system would display local walking paths. The public comment report documents both comments and staff responses, and no changes to the draft amendment were proposed based on the feedback. The public comment report is attachment 3 of your business item. Overall, this policy plan amendment process has taken place between June through December of 2025. The draft amendment to the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan was released for public comment in late September 2025, followed by a public hearing in early November and the close of the comment period in November 17th. The final public comment report was completed by the end of November, with consideration by the Met Council planned for later this month. The proposed action aligns with the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan, specifically the system plan's actions to update system classifications and annually refresh map datasets, and supports Imagine 2050's core value of stewardship by promoting a sustainable, up-to-date mapping approach. The proposed action before you is that the Met Council accept the public comment summary reports on the draft amendment to the 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan and adopt the revised final 2050 Regional Parks and Trails Policy Plan amendment as shown in attachment 2. Thank you for your participation throughout this process. I will now stand for any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Candy, for the report, for your work on this. I see Mr. Fain is here as well, part of your team, and thanks to the whole group. I respect getting comments that said, I can't believe you didn't already do this. It's very affirming for the direction we're going in. This is a big step. Committee members, questions, comments, discussion? Councilmember Carter.
Thank you for the report. And I must say that I appreciate the careful manner in which we have been going through this process, and for all that think, wow, you haven't done this already, I would just say that it is very, very important that these factors be aligned in the way that they are being. And so with confidence that there has been a careful process, I'm happy to make the motion if we're ready.
Yeah,
for
please.
that.
And Councilmember Carter has moved this item. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. Discussion? Yeah, please, Director Barajas.
I just wanted to just highlight and thank Tracy and the team for the amount of work, not in editing and creating this amendment, but in the amount of work it has taken to actually transition from a paper database to a GIS database. It was painstaking. I know probably made her eyes go crosswise, but a lot of work with our IS teams to really go through every single document and working with our agency partners. Like, did we get this line right? Is this the right thing? That doesn't look right. So years of work that I think the amendment doesn't really quite give justice to, but really wanted to recognize that. It goes into that.
Thank you, Director Barajas, and then the committee adds its thanks. These kinds of transitions are never easy, right? I went through a few of these GIS transitions while I was at the Minneapolis City Council, and it's a lot of work. Thank you very much. Further discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thanks again to you and your team. Committee members will move on to our next non-consent business item, which is 2025-302. It's plant monitoring program update recommendations. And Mackenzie Young Walters is here to present. Welcome, Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chair. So you last saw this item as an information item on November 3rd, and we're now returning as a business item. Just a brief refresher, I promise I'll be quick because I know we just went through all of this, but we're looking at updating our nearly 25-year-old plant monitoring program. This is the program we use to track development in the developing edge of the metro area. And communities report their sewered residential developments, and in exchange for exceeding Metropolitan Council density policy, they can also then get credit and flexibility in their land use planning. Cities often ask us for additional flexibility, and one of the things we observed as the years went on is this program was being used less and less by communities for that flexibility. And so one of the things Imagine 2050 committed us to doing was looking at how we could make the program more relevant, especially by shortening the look-back period. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And a lot of the discussion will center on updating you on some of the conversations we've had with LUAC as well as a focus group since our last meeting. So with that, just a quick reminder, staff looked at 5 different scenarios, a 20-year rolling data set, previous decade plus current decade data set, a 10-year rolling data set, and then roughly trying to align the data with the Thrive 2040 comprehensive plan adoption, and then also just looking at the last 10 plats. I was told you didn't need to see all of my fun tables again, so you will not be getting that. But our high-level takeaways were that the longer data sets, so like the 2005 one to 2010 ones, didn't have the type of impact we wanted to see. Only the last 10 plat scenario had too much impact. Numbers bounced around way too much year to year. Both the 2015 and 2019 scenario looked like good candidates for accomplishing our goals. We saw a little bit more spikiness with the 2019 scenarios as more communities had smaller data sets of 10 plats or less. And we really liked watching how the 2015 scenario aligned 10 years of plat monitoring data with the 10 years of land use planning data that we're going to be using for evaluating density policy consistency. And we also realized we had to look at what these scenarios were going to look like 15, 10, 20 years down the road. So with that, we really decided that the 2015 scenario with a addition that we would also look at the last 10 plats. If communities had reported less than 10 plats in the last 10 years, did the best job of accomplishing our goals. We felt it was really important to balance the city's request for flexibility with maintaining adherence to Imagine 2050's density policy, not granting so much flexibility that communities didn't need to meet the new 3.5 units per acre target. We also needed to find that balance of a data set that was big enough to be consistent, but still small enough that a city's recent performance would actually alter the trajectory and their numbers. So that was important. Really, we wanted to try to create a system that would do smooth and consistent change rather than big jumps year to year. With that, the 2015 scenario, about twice as many cities increase density as lose it. It provides safeguards for our lower platting cities by letting them look at the last 10 plats. We didn't see a big volatility spike between using the last 10 years of data and using our current data set, which is 24 years of data. So that was really encouraging to us. It's very easy to explain to some cities. We're looking at your last 10 years of data. Every year your new data comes on, your oldest data comes off. As I mentioned, it does align really nicely, 10 years of data with 10 years of future land use planning. And even under the current, almost 2/3 of the cities can use their existing data for flexibility under the Imagine 2050 policy. The only downside, the two biggest downsides I should say, is the 2019 scenario did have more cities benefiting than the 2015 scenario, and it doesn't align very cleanly with the comprehensive planning cycle. So we're still gonna have, that overlap where at points half of your data is gonna be your last comp plan, half's gonna be your new comp plan. There's not really a good way to do that without just clearing the slate every 10 years. But I did want to point that out as a drawback. I will note too, looking forward, by the time we begin looking at the 2050 comp plans, the difference between the data sets in the 2015 scenario and the 2019 scenario would be 1 year if they're applying early, 0 years if they're applying in the nick of time. So we don't think there's going to, practically speaking, at the moment of comp plan adoption, there won't be that much of a difference between the impact of the two. With that, just bringing you up to speed on what we've heard from other bodies. The Land Use Advisory Committee asked for clarification on why staff was proposing removing suburban cities from the program and limiting it only to suburban edge and rural center. The reason for that is the suburban cities that are currently in it were not suburban cities when they enrolled. When they enrolled, they were on the developing edge. They were expected to meet 3 units per acre for density policy. Since then, they've moved from doing greenfield development to doing infield development. In Thrive 2040, they were, moved from 3 to 5 units an acre. Now they're being moved from 5 to 7 units an acre. Just being candid, they're not doing the type of development this program was designed to track. And so we feel it's appropriate to really focus it in on the program's intention, which is tracking what's happening in the developing edges of the metro. During the CDC committee, we did have a question regarding whether or not it'd be possible to give credit for cities that had been platting above 3 units per acre, but were not necessarily meeting the 3.5. What we did look at that analysis when we were first looking at changing the program. Ultimately, philosophically, we felt it was really important to maintain the policy direction we'd received of encouraging communities to hit the 3.5 units per acre. Well, we wanted to give credit for, the good work communities were doing. We didn't want to provide a mechanism where communities could plan for or not plan for growth at that required 3.5 units per acre. We also looked at things holistically. With the shorter look back period, on average, our suburban edge communities are gaining 0.37 units per acre, which is, a big distance just with the shorter look back period, which is a big jump of that distance from the 3 to 3.5. On median, it is 0.09 less, but still, again, 20% of that is being addressed just by changing the program window. We're also looking at giving cities more flexibility through the updated MUSE implementation guidelines that we talked about, where they'll be able to net out more areas, which will have the effect of increasing the net residential density of plats. And when we looked at that, we felt like there wasn't necessarily a need to provide that retroactive credit because there were other mechanisms being put in place to push cities' net residential density up to make it easier for them to meet the 3.5. A final note is when we looked through to the data set, we found 4 cities that were currently platting at over 3 units an acre, but under 3.5. And none of those 4 cities are cities that are currently using the program's flexibility to meet policy requirements. So that for us did really lessen the urgency of incorporating that. So just to explain our rationale a little better than I did in our last meeting. Finally, we did reconvene our focus group of 11 plat monitoring cities. They didn't have any major questions. And when I asked them how they felt about it, I got 6 floating thumbs up out of 11. So I feel pretty confident that they're comfortable with these recommendations. With that, we do have a proposed action before you, which is that the Metropolitan Council update the plat monitoring program as follows. For cities enrolled in the plat monitoring program, the Met Council will calculate net residential density by combining the average net density of the city's last 10 years of actual platting, or the average net density of the city's last 10 plats if fewer than 10 plats have been recorded in the last 10 years, and the lowest allowable density on the land identified to support forecasted growth in the relevant staging period. Cities may elect not to have plat monitoring program data included in the calculations. And then 2, eligibility for the plat monitoring program should be restricted to cities with suburban edge and rural center community designations. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Young-Welch's, for your work on this and for the presentation. Very well presented. Questions, comments? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to better understand how cities are going to have to do things between the 2040 plan and the 2050 plan with the change, because right now they've got stuff planned through 2040 and say they're at, 3.2 through 2040. Do they have to just make 3.5 on the things that they're adding for 2050 or changing from 2040? Or do they have to go back and change all the densities in their 2040 stuff?
Yep. Chair, Councilmember, and Director Barajas will correct me if I misspeak here. My understanding is, we acknowledge that cities have their land use plans for 3 units per acre. How we will be looking at it is if a comprehensive plan amendment going forward holds that density steady or increases it moving in the direction of the Imagine 2050 policy, it's good even if it doesn't necessarily hit it. So if a city had, say, 3.1 units per acre currently guided in their land use plan, and they do a comprehensive plan amendment and they end at 3.15, that's okay. We're not going to say, oh, you didn't hit 3.5, you have to redo everything. However, if a city is amending their comprehensive plan in a way that moves them downwards and away from the established target, so if my 3.1 city did a land use amendment that moved them to 3.05, we would then say that's inconsistent because they are moving away from the Imagine 2050 policy goal of 3.5 units per acre. This is a case where if a city is, in the plat monitoring program and their plat monitoring data has them averaging out, higher above the 3.5, then they'd be good. And any community that's already in excess of 3.5, of course, if they're 3.6 and go to 3.55, would also not have an issue. Did I explain that correctly? Thank you.
Yeah, and
Director Burns.
Thank you. And I would just add two things. So the approach that Mackenzie discussed is part of the business item that the council adopted a couple months after adopting Imagine 2050. It was about implementation of Imagine 2050 and what that time period looks like between the adoption of Imagine 2050 and when system statements are issued, and then when comprehensive plans are due to the council. And then as a part of Imagine 2050, the council also said in the land use policy, in review of the 2050 comprehensive plans, that we would be looking at all land identified to support the forecasted growth for the entire planning horizon, which was a change from what we had seen previously, or the council's policy previously, which is where we were only looking at density for any changes in guided land use to support forecasted growth. It's a little nuanced, but it does open up a whole range of essentially take away sort of the grandfathered in of previous plan approvals that had kept densities really low in a lot of areas, not just in suburban edge communities. So those are the two policies through the council action that staff are implementing.
Councilmember Wolf?
Yeah, I'm still getting my brain around it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So like if communities had apartment guided land that has not yet developed, that would be a positive towards them under what you're talking about, right? Because they're allowing it, it just hasn't developed yet. Okay. Okay, I'm going to think for a second if anybody else has.
I have in queue Councilmember Morales.
So to try and understand it, we're going to be taking that approach from today till December 31st, 2027, but then once it's January 1st, 2028, all land use going forward past that date have to reflect the 2050? Or is that just past 2028 too?
Director Braz.
Mr. Chair, I would just kindly correct that through the end of 2028, plans are due in December 31st of 2028. So then after that, and actually a little bit before then, per that business item, I believe it's September is the deadline for amending the existing 2040 plans. So that approach only applies to amendments. And after that, we are no longer reviewing amendments to 2040 comprehensive plans. But yes, then
Thank
going
you.
forward.
I got my years mixed up. Thank you.
It happens all the
Thank
time.
you, thanks. Further discussion on this report? Councilmember Wolf, did you have time to?
I'm good.
Okay, cool, good, thank you, yep. So Mr. Young Walters has proposed a motion for us to update the plant monitoring program. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Mr. Walters. And we will move into our final non-consent business item. It's the 2050 Planning Assistance Grant Program and Small Communities Planning Program Funding Award Recommendations. Unfortunately, Ms. Torres is not with us, but fortunately, we have Director Barajas here to present on the item. Director Barajas.
Thank you. I'm sorry to report that Angela's out sick, and maybe for actually a little bit of time, unfortunately, but she is very well prepared, so I will do my best to prepare, to present materials for you. This was also in front of the Land Use Advisory Committee just previous week, because last week Thursday was Thanksgiving, so very recently. So I will in advance thank Councilmember Morales for any corrections I might need to add here. So Lisa Barajas, Executive Director of Community Development Division. I have before you our funding award recommendations for the 2050 Planning Assistance Grant Program and our Small Communities Planning Program. In front of you, or on this slide, is Table 1 from the staff report. And for the Planning Assistance Grant Program, the committee has reviewed 3 scenarios using 3 community types for award amounts, so sewered, unsewered, and then this county/consortium category. Using scenario A as a baseline, both LUAC and CDC reviewed those scenarios B and C, and LUAC had indicated a preference for that scenario C. Discussion was really focused on the minor reduction to individual planning grants in order to support other programs, and that was far outweighed by the impact of additional assistance for small communities. Members of the LUAC really identified having a really big impact with communities who need it the most, and where a couple $1,000s may not impact a larger community, it can have go a long ways in a much smaller community. Members also emphasized that both scenarios were significant increases from grants that were provided in the previous planning cycle. So really just seeing positive approaches to both, and that even in a slightly reduced for some is still quite a bit more than the last cycle of planning grants. On this slide is Table 2 from your staff report. The overall Planning Assistance Fund budget has been set at $5.64 million, which includes the planning grants, the 2 incentive grants, and the Small Communities Planning Program engineering costs. This table shows distribution of the program funds for different program goals for the preferred scenario, that's scenario C. This table also resolves a calculation error previously that had inadvertently left additional dollars in the program budget. The calculation previously used was $5.6 million instead of $5.64 million. So since the programmatic goal is to expend all of the available budgeted dollars, and given the discussion with you and with LUAC previously, we are recommending that those funds be added to the Small Communities Planning Program engineering costs. This would increase each of the 29 eligible communities' allocation by $2,500 and spend all but $1,500 of the budget. Table 3 from your staff report, and seen on this slide, identifies the range of costs by community type and budget scenario for all 29 eligible communities in that Small Communities Planning Program. And this identifies the possible budget allocation for each local government based on what type of services are provided. The table shows how many communities fall into each type and the estimated cost to accomplish the water planning for those communities. Even though the communities are small, they do have a variety of different engineering needs depending on whether or not they have the sewer or not, their own wastewater treatment plant or not, whether they're a public water supplier or not. So all of those different elements, it's a little bit of a matrix of all of the different pieces that the communities can have. And you can see across those 29 communities, there are 6 different categories just among them. LUAC, after indicating a preference for scenario C, had a general consensus around providing a not-to-exceed engineering allocation for program participants. This allows for an estimated budgetary allocation toward engineering costs based on the participants' need and expected planning effort, considering their community type for wastewater and for water supply planning. The not-to-exceed allocation approach provides the option for local governments to choose which engineering services they wish to prioritize out of that allocation. So while we know that they have these needs, they may decide that, oh, we've got our public works director, they'll take care of it, no need for us to spend our grant dollars there, we want to spend our allocation over on these items instead. Any additional engineering costs above and beyond that not to exceed amount then would be required to be the responsible of that local unit of government. This business item also includes a recommendation for an additional $14,000 maximum for each eligible community to increase their base award amounts, with $10,000 towards incentivizing advancement of regional goals and $4,000 toward incentivizing early plan completion. These amounts reflect the effort needed to meet the goals of each incentive grant while providing a higher level of assistance where it might likely be needed most. Because of the variety of approaches and multiple regional goals, the regional goal incentive is intended to be community-driven and locally specific and locally defined. As part of our technical assistance for applicants as they're thinking through how they might approach that incentivized goal approach, council staff will provide examples from existing plans that can help spur, but not limit, ideas that local governments may come up with. As a reminder, the program under the law is meant to support communities with a demonstrated financial need, and per your direction, support the smallest communities with the most, where we've seen that most demonstrated need and available financial resources, as well as to provide at least a similar level of support as provided in previous planning cycles. The Planning Assistance Grants Program would provide direct financial support to 67 eligible participants, with 2 counties responsible for planning for the townships in their jurisdiction. That number actually represents 103 local governments. This hits the same target as in 2040, excluding 21 small city grants. However, the individual grant awards for eligible communities in this round would increase by 25%, while the county consortium award increases by 31% to really account for inflation and to cover additional costs. The new Small Communities Planning Program adds a significant increase in support for the region's smallest communities with the most demonstrated financial need. Up to 29 communities are eligible for that program. 21 in the last cycle, in the 2040 cycle, 21 small cities were provided $10,000 each. And that was new for that cycle. For the 2050 cycle, the Planning Assistance Grant Program and the Small Communities Planning Program in total support planning efforts for 124 out of the 188 jurisdictions across this region. In the 2030 and 2040 planning cycles, the grant program provided financial support for 86 and 103 jurisdictions respectively. So these 2050 programs will provide financial support for 2/3 of the region's communities, representing a 20% increase in communities from the 2040 planning cycle. So the rationale for the recommendations before you today are grounded in the statutory authority to provide both funding to local governments, but as well as to enter into contracts with local governments to assist with the comprehensive planning process. And the proposed action before you today is that the Met Council set the grant award amounts for the 2050 Planning Assistance Grant Program as follows. A, that the base award amounts for eligible communities are as follows. For Seward communities, $40,000, unsewered communities, $25,000, county or consortium, $110,000. And then B, for eligible Planning Assistance Grant Program participants may choose to opt in to either or both of the following incentives grants: advancing regional goals at $10,000, early plan completion at $4,000. And if an eligible participant opts into an incentive grant program and later either chooses not to or is unable to complete program requirements, they shall forfeit those grant dollars, but there shall be no penalty. And then finally, number 2, to set the funding amounts for the 2050 Small Communities Planning Program as follows. A, each eligible community shall have an identified not to exceed engineering budget allocation based on need and expected planning effort as determined by the type of wastewater and water supply services further described in Table 3 and Attachment 1 of this report. And B, any additional engineering costs would be required to be the responsibility of the local government. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director Barajas. Questions, comments on that report? Councilmember Chambas, then Councilmember Wolf.
Just really happy that we have some additional flexibility and options for these small planning assistance grants. I've been to many of these smaller cities, and their staff size is quite small. Some of them are performing multiple jobs, so hopefully this will give them a little bit of a lift that they really need.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding is if communities don't do the extra grants, the going above and beyond or the early completion, that money just sits there until the 2060 plan?
Mr.
Director
Chair.
Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Wolf, that's correct. And that is the approach that council has used in the past with non-competitive grants. We've even had communities in previous planning cycles forfeit portions of their non-incentive. We never had incentives previously because they didn't complete their plans on time or were many years delayed in the process. But that money goes back into the program pot that can help see the next round of planning grants.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had looked at communities who got money the last time, 10 years ago, and didn't get it this time. And I had asked Councilmember Morales to have LUAC look at it, and they were fine with those communities not getting funded this time. But I want to bring attention to, in the current program that we've already given the eligibility criteria and approval, really small communities go up to 150% of regional net tax capacity. Is that how you say it, Director Barajas?
Net tax capacity per capita.
Yeah. And the sort of small communities up to 5,000, I think it was, can have up to 125% of net tax capacity per capita. So, you know, they're not way rich, but they're doing pretty good. And then the remaining communities can go up to 100%. But because we put that cap on population, there are some communities that are as low as below 65% of net tax capacity that aren't eligible anymore. Richfield, Maplewood, Brooklyn Park, Coon Rapids, and Cottage Grove are all below 70% of median net tax capacity per capita, and we're leaving them out. I'm wondering if there isn't any way, because there's 10 communities that would be eligible but for the population cap, if there's any way that if the incentive grants don't eat up all of the money, that we could give grants to those communities as well. Because it just seems kind of unfair to me that communities that I don't see as wealthy are being seen as not needing to be in any partnership with us, while we're encouraging other communities to go above and beyond by giving them extra help. It just doesn't pass the smell test to me. It's not a collaborative sort of approach. And so I'm wondering if there's any way that if those incentive grants don't eat up all the money, that we could have more participants.
Councilmember Braz, did you have a response? I know that Councilmember Morales, who represents us as chair of LUAC, wants to respond. I also have council members Lindstrom and Chambliss in queue. So do you want to start with the response?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In practicality, the funds are there and sit in the council's account until communities meet the program requirements, and then they earn it. So it's on a reimbursement basis. So we wouldn't be at the point of knowing whether or not they're going to meet those program requirements, one for early incentive until that deadline has passed for early incentive, and then fully on advancing regional goals until they're at the end of submitted their plan and gone through the process and closed out their work plan. So well after the deadline for completing comprehensive plans under the law. So on a practical basis, it's hard to be able to say they're not using it because we won't know for many years yet.
And then if it's cool with Councilmembers Lindstrom and Chambliss, I'll defer to Councilmember Morales. I think he was time. Thank you. Councilmember Morales.
Thank you, Chair Wilgren. One of the main things we did at the LUAC committee, like when the population numbers, before they even came out, we met 1 month prior to it, and then once the new numbers came out, we debated the second time. What cities are we excluding? What little counties, consortiums are we excluding? The same thing we did with the net tax capacity. Before those numbers came out, we asked them, well, what's going to happen if, you know, this city grows exponentially this much with the next tax capacity, but their population numbers are down? So we did talk intensely about those two specific items in the land use community. We literally spent 4 months just on those two topics. So everybody that was there was asking the questions, did have the best in mind for all the communities, but we weren't able to do something that would benefit. If we did something that benefited every single city, it would be a lot smaller than by helping the most needed cities with a little bit more money. So we had to make a decision, you know, do we want to help all these cities with less money than we did back 10 years ago, or do we want to try and help more cities with a little bit more money to get them further along in the process? So it was talked about extensively, and, you know, we had to make the choices we did to benefit the whole region.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf, comment, and then I'll continue down the queue.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Number one, communities have to decide ahead of time whether they want to do the extra thing so that they can have a grant agreement with the council. So we should know at some point earlier than when everybody's done how much of that money is taken up. But doing a $40,000 grant for all of the 10 communities that are below median net tax capacity but above the population limit would be $400,000. So even if only half of the communities decided to do the extra thing, there would be money available potentially in the budget to have more partner communities. And I realize that LUAC talked about it, but they talked about it under a very narrow window. It wasn't looking at adding 10 more communities or not. It was looking at if you go from 1 year's data to the next year's data, is somebody on the bubble going to fall off? It didn't deal with the case of like Richfield or Coon Rapids or some of these other communities that don't have a big tax base, that aren't wealthy, in my feeling about the thing, on whether we should partner with them or not. So I'm not trying to belittle what LUAC did, but it was a different discussion that they had than what I'm bringing up today.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Just thinking about it through a very small community perspective, I was thinking about the city of Lauderdale in my district, which is eligible. And they are very unique in that in the next 10 years, there will be 2 major developments that are not in Lauderdale, but literally right next to Lauderdale. The Les Bolstad Golf Course, redevelopment in Falcon Heights, 140 some acres. And then the Luther Seminary redevelopment in St. Paul, just across the street from Lauderdale. And I was just thinking about the number of staff that they have in their city and the difference between a larger city. The larger city would have engineers on staff, most likely, and how this grant program will be so welcome for wastewater engineering, water supply engineering, stormwater engineering for a small community like Lauderdale, and many others. That's it.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Those observations. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thanks. I too have several cities that are very small. Osseo, Hilltop, which is kind of sandwiched in between cities. Crystal. Is Crystal one of the eligible? I can't remember. I don't think Crystal's eligible.
I think it is.
Oh, it is, okay. So, I know how strapped their resources are. At the heart of putting together this additional support is support for small communities. I did look up the September 18th, 2025 Land Use Advisory Committee presentation, and it did address comparing, population to net tax capacity. And the grant-eligible communities on the population side increased from 63 to 68. And then looking at net tax capacity, the grant-eligible communities decreased from 68 to 64. So it's not a huge change in terms of the analysis that was done. And it's good to know that there was so much time spent on looking at this over several meetings, because I was able to kind of drill down over several meetings to see how they were focusing and making this criteria for programs that we didn't have before. So I'm hoping that this stabilizes these small communities and gives them the lift, because if small communities don't get support, there can be some negative impacts in terms of the populations that they serve and whether they can even still exist if they have to make some tough decisions during tough times. So I'm glad that we have the opportunity to help them.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion on this report? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would note that even communities that have city engineers and public works and all of those planners and all of those things still end up paying consultants to do engineering studies and other studies, land use studies, also small area studies, because they have the staff capacity to do the day-to-day work, but something of the magnitude of a comp plan is a much bigger lift, and they don't have the internal staff capacity to do that. That is why I was suggesting that we should partner as well with those larger communities. I'm not in any way wanting to take away the basic plan support to any of the small communities. I think it's fantastic that we're doing a better job with the small communities. My question is, having a huge increase in terms of the extra grants, because communities that were getting 30,000 10 years ago have the ability to get up to 54,000 this time. And all I was suggesting is that maybe we should have more communities getting 40,000 than necessarily having 54,000. Definitely not taking anything away from the small communities.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Carter.
Only because I feel a need to just register in that I absolutely sympathize, with having a city, my only city, as St. Paul, that all of us have this work to do, and it comes up, on this cycle. It is not planned for every year. But I also feel real committed to our desire to help the smaller communities that do not have the staff to be able to take on this additional work when it comes up in this cycle. And I do know that cities like St. Paul, while they would love to have the assistance, anytime it's available, also do have a planful approach to this. They know that they're going into the cycle. They're embedding it in their plans and able to take it on. Now, would they want it if we were able to provide it? Absolutely. But I feel that they have the capacity to do this work and that it is in their work plans. And so I'm going to really appreciate, too, the fact that we're working hard to embrace this need that we've heard so much about over the years, that we've talked so much about, and insisted that our staff planfully address in bringing this recommendation forward to us. I am in full support of it. And again, people in St. Paul, please forgive me.
You notice I haven't said anything, so I have one city. So, and I thank you, Councilmember Carter, for those comments, and thank everyone in the committee for sure. And I intend to support the action as proposed. Councilmember, if I hear what you're saying, and this is just when you get to one of those points, someone's going to be above the line, someone's going to be below the line. Do you spread it a little thinner? The sort of peanut butter approach. So I feel like this has been a thoughtful process. This is different than we've done it in years past, and I feel like we're being responsive, especially to the smaller communities. And so we'll see how this goes. We'll see how this works. We'll see how well served the communities are, how well used the non-competitive grant programs are, and I look forward to seeing how this goes. And I feel like as a council, we're trying to be as responsive as we can to the needs in the communities throughout the region. So with that, I would seek a motion on this item, please.
So move.
Thank you, Councilmember Ross. Thank you, Councilmember Lindstrom. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you, that carries with one dissent. Cool. And we have completed our agenda for today. Michelle, anything for the committee?
I would just like to say our next meeting is December 15th, and that's the last Community Development Committee meeting for the year.
Cool, and I would just urge, because Michelle's just too nice to do that, when we're doing the RSVPs for the meeting, that folks respond. We weren't exactly certain we were going to have a quorum tonight. There's some last minute illnesses and things, so yeah, please be helpful and respond. Director Barajas, anything?
Additional, thank you.
All right. Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.